نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Tonight we continue inshallah with reciting a hadith from كتاب الشمائل المحمدية لأبي عيسى الترمذي رحمه الله صاحب الجامع صاحب السنن. And I'm going to read hadith, I believe it's number 5. Oh, subhanAllah, I forgot which one I chose for tonight. Give me a second here too. No, I'm fine. You're in ta'ajuz. I'm fine. No. Right. So the hadith tonight is a hadith that one of my teachers, the Sheikh Muhammad Khaterah, hafidhahullah, he's a tabib, used to love to narrate, and he made us memorize when I was really, really young. I know this hadith. It's a very long hadith, and I know it from a very young age. The hadith itself, there's a lot of there's question about the sanad, but the actual chain of narration. But the wording of the hadith, the matan, the actual content, is fully agreed upon. There's nothing in the hadith that does not exist in another authentic narration. And this is where it's important to know the difference between sahih sanad, sahih al-matan, and the difference and the weakness on both sides. So this hadith may have some question in terms of the authenticity of the chain, but the actual content of the hadith has no disagreement upon among scholars, so it's very safe to narrate. And it has a nice story to it, so I like to tell it. So I'll recite the beginning of it, and I'll tell you what it is. فيقول الإمام رحمه الله: حدثنا أحمد بن عبدة الضبي البصري وعلي بن حجر وأبو جعفر محمد بن الحسين وهو ابن أبي حليمة والمعنى واحد. قالوا: حدثنا عيسى بن يونس عن عمر بن عبد الله مولى غفرة حدثني إبراهيم بن محمد من ولد علي بن أبي طالب قال: كان علي إذا وصف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم قال. So the hadith, this hadith is narrated to us by Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu anhu wardah, by one of his grandchildren. So the da'af in the sanad here, like the weakness in the chain, this is just for your own kind of information. The weakness of the chain here is just that the person who's narrating the hadith, Ibrahim ibn Muhammad, is the grandchild or the great-grandchild of Sayyidina Ali. We don't have full evidence that he actually met his grandfather. But he's narrating this because he learned from either one of his parents or his grandfather that his great-grandfather said this, but he didn't point out who told him. This is how delicate and precise the science of hadith is. So Ibrahim ibn Muhammad, the great-grandson of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib, is a great imam. We have no reason to believe that he lies here. But he just failed to tell us, who is it that told you that your grandfather said this? He didn't pick it out. He didn't point it out. He forgot to say that, oh, my dad told me this, or my granddad told me this. He just said, my great-grandfather said this, because this is something that his family has been handing down generation after generation. So, and the scholars still point out the hadith having a problem with its authenticity. And this is from the amana. This is the scientific amana, or the scientific integrity that we have in our deen, that even something like this, no, just because you're his great-grandson is not going to give you a free ticket to say whatever. No, you have to tell us exactly who said this. But the actual wording of the hadith, there's nothing in it that is added that you don't find in an authentic narration. So we narrate this hadith with a lot of openness. And it's in تحفة الأحوذي as well. And this is what Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu said. قال: كان علي إذا وصف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. When he described the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam, we say the following. I'm going to actually skip the first part, because the first part I'm going to narrate to you tomorrow in another hadith. I want to take the piece that I want you to hear. He would say, فكان مما قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أجود الناس صدرا وأصدق الناس لهجة وألينهم عريكة وأكرمهم عشرة من رآه بديهة هابه ومن خالطه معرفة أحبه يقول ناعته لم أر قبله ولا بعده مثله صلى الله عليه وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. Just probably the most beautiful description that exists of all descriptions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And who else to make it aside from Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu? Again, was a child in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. Even before Islam, Sayyidina Ali lived in the Prophet ﷺ's house as a child. So no one knows him more than Sayyidina Ali does. Anhu. No one has seen the Prophet ﷺ in all of his fluctuations of life in different positions, and no one was closer to him than Sayyidina Ali. So when he says these things, you can take it for sure that this is how he was. He would describe him by saying, أَجْوَدَ النَّاسِ صَدْرًا. He was the most generous person. Sadr is the chest. He was just the most generous person. Generosity here is not necessarily with wealth. Generosity is with time, it's with compassion, it's with love, it's with attention. This is where generosity actually matters. You can be very generous financially, but be very, very stingy when it comes to your attention and your love and your time and your energy and your devotion and your dedication. The Prophet ﷺ was أَجْوَدَ النَّاسِ صَدْرًا. He was generous with everything that his chest contained, ﷺ. Whatever he had, he was the most generous person with sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ajma'in. And that's what you find this everywhere. No one ever came to him, ﷺ, he was too busy to speak to them. No one ever came to him, ﷺ, he was in too much trouble to actually sit down and listen to them. He always found time for them, ﷺ. I have no idea how he does that. I have absolutely no clue how he was able to do that in his life, ﷺ. And the more you read about him, the more you find this as a consistent aspect or characteristic and trait of who he was, ﷺ. And I have absolutely no idea how he kept it up, because it's extremely difficult to do so. But this is what everyone says. He was just very generous, ﷺ. وَأَصْدَقَ النَّاسِ لَهْجَةً. And he was someone who, whenever he spoke, he only said the truth. The words that came out of his mouth were always truthful. You never heard something from him, alayhi salatu wasalam, that you could point out as being untruthful or deceitful or a lie or an exaggeration. Everything he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, was truthful and was honest. And that honesty, by the way, when you spend a lot of time with honesty, it allows you to become sensitive to lies. Like, you become very sensitive to when you're listening to BS, because you've been with honesty for so long. So when someone starts to say things that aren't true, and you become sensitive. And the Sahaba, because they spent so much time with him, alayhi salatu wasalam, and they were so used to honesty and truthfulness, they were people who picked up someone who was lying really quickly. You couldn't fool the Sahaba because of how used to honesty they were from him, alayhi salatu wasalam, from living with him. And that is something that we for sure are lacking these days. وَأَلْيَنَهُمْ عَرِيكَةً. Al-arika is nature. Al-ma'ruk, it's a food. It's when you take and you kind of put things together, you put ingredients together, and then you have something. It's nature. وَأَلْيَنَهُمْ عَرِيكَةً. His nature was just very soft, alayhi salatu wasalam. Layyin. It was easy, alayhi salatu wasalam. He was not someone difficult. If you traveled with him, you spoke to him, if you worked with him, he wasn't someone who put up obstacles or barriers or made life difficult, or was always there with the stick or with the finger, and always had something, always objecting to something, and there's always something not working with that person. You've all worked with someone like that. And if you haven't, you're that person. if right now you say, no, I've never worked with anything like that, that's because you're that person probably in that group. So be careful. Alayhi salatu wasalam, alyanahum arikatan. He was someone who was easy going. If you could make it easy, you could make it work, if you could keep it moving, he would do that, alayhi salatu wasalam, because it's just his nature. Wa akramahum ishratan. He was someone that if you lived with, you akramahum, meaning if you lived with him, he treated you well. The more you lived with him, the better he treated you. The longer the time you spent with him in your life, alayhi salatu wasalam, the higher he held you. The higher he raised you. The more he treated you well, the more he loved you, the more he gave you, alayhi salatu wasalam. Not the opposite. Not the more I spend time with you, the less you like me, and the less time you want to spend with me, and the more bad things you have to say about me. No, the more time he spent with you, alayhi salatu wasalam, the more good things he said about you. The more he gave you, and the more he treated you well, alayhi salatu wasalam, and the more he dignified your status, because that is the af'al al-kiram. That's the traits of people of dignity and of high. And then my absolute favorite description: مَنْ رَآهُ بَدِيهَةً هَابَهُ. If you ran into him for the first time, alayhi salatu wasalam, you just revered him. It was reverence. It wasn't fear. It was reverence. It was hayba. He just had this hayba about him, alayhi salatu wasalam. You saw him the first time, you felt small. You felt a bit intimidated, a bit scared, a bit taken by the aura of this man who walked in. وَمَنْ خَالَطَهُ مَعْرِفَةً. And once you get to know him a little bit, alayhi salatu wasalam, أَحَبَّهُ, you fall in love with him, alayhi salatu wasalam. And I can't imagine it, but يَقُولُ نَاعِتُهُ. The person who describes him will say the following: لَمْ أَرَ قَبْلَهُ وَلَا بَعْدَهُ مِثْلَهُ. I've never seen anyone before him nor anyone after him that is even remotely similar to him alayhi salatu wasalam. And that kind of sums up his description as a person alayhi salatu wasalam. I hope you found that beneficial. يروي الإمام الترمذي في جامعه بسند فيه مقال عن علي بن أبي طالب كان إذا وصف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: وهو خاتم النبيين أجود الناس صدرا وأصدق الناس لهجة وألينهم عريكة وأكرمهم عشرة، من رآه بديهة هابه ومن خالطه معرفة أحبه، يقول ناعته لم أر قبله ولا بعده مثله، صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. صدق رسول الله. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله